Welcome. Sorry about that. My name is Katie Martucci from Career Services here at Del Valle University. I want to welcome you to Ignite 2020, our career exploration series. And this session is going to specifically focus on careers in accounting and finance. I also want to give special thanks to our sponsor, College Hunks Hauling Junk and Moving, as well as Delaware Valley University Alumni Council. So thank you to both of them. You can find the links to their sites in the chat to the right of your screen. All of our panelists are also willing to connect with you. So if you have questions and you'd like to follow up with them, stay in touch with CSPD at delval.edu, or again, stick around for those roundtables and connect directly. If you have any technical difficulties, just go ahead and use the chat feature, again, to the right of your screen. And we will now get started. So I would love for our panelists here to please introduce themselves. And in addition to that, once you introduce yourself, just go ahead and dive right into this first question here. So tell us how your first job has impacted your career and where you're at today. And Andrew, you're first up on my screen, so why don't you go ahead?
Sure. So my name is Andrew. I'm with Northwestern Mutual in the campus recruiting space. Been with in this role for about a little less than a year now. So my first job ever was actually serving tables at an Italian restaurant near my house. And I was a server for a few years, all through high school and all through college. And I would say kind of how that shaped my career path and how that shaped, who I am now professionally. For one, I learned early that I enjoy serving people. Like I do enjoy the dynamic of kind of making someone's experience well and giving them kind of good service and good support. So being in a customer facing role kind of made sense after getting that experience. It also made me realize that I didn't want to continue doing that for the rest of my life. So it gave me a bit of drive. It encouraged me to find better. It certainly is hard work being in the service industry. I'm sure many people know, it's not easy, but it's a great kind of exposure into working with a team. Like I learned early on how to split tips and certain things that we have to do to work together and collaboratively, where some might, be more keen to work kind of in a selfish way, but having a group dynamic and navigating things in that way, I learned early on is going to lead to better success. And that was kind of a realization I had through working at a restaurant. And it also made me realize that I want to work for a good organization. It helped me see it's not necessarily about what I want to do, but where I want to do it. That the organization really does make a huge difference to how you feel in a job, how you feel in a career. And it's not so necessarily important of exactly what you're doing or harping on what you're going to do, but more so where are you going to do it and where are you going to build that. And working for different restaurants, seeing how different restaurants approach different things kind of made me realize, all right, it's not all about what, it's more sometimes about where. So I think that really shaped kind of my early path and has led, to my success now.
Thank you for thinking back to some of those earlier experiences. I believe a lot of students can probably relate to that. I'm sure they can. So Brian, go ahead.
Yeah, no, so my first job out of school was with oh, sorry, I was looking at my notes. I worked for one of the big four accounting firms, Ernst & Young. So kind of the benefit there and the value offer was you go in with an internship, kind of like your junior into senior year, and then you hopefully go into your senior year with a job. So that was awesome. But I think the professional I am today is very different than what I started as. So I started as kind of feeling like having this imposter syndrome, I would put on the suit, but I would feel like I was playing dress up. So I think that role kind of got me in the headspace where you kind of fake it till you make it, and I became that professional who I wanted to be. I mean, those first few years, it was hard to know how things were going to come together. But to me, that first experience was like boot camp, especially at E&Y. It was you come in, you're working on big clients, lots of pressure, long hours. But what it did is it helped iron out a lot of imperfections, and I had a lot of them, and kind of got me used to what's at work, like being accountable, delivering quality work, no excuses, that sort of environment. So I think that taught me a lot. But on the flip side, it also taught me what I didn't want. So, that sort of, there's you got to make choices in your career about what do you want, what do you value. So I also learned in that, like, I need quality of life and work-life balance. I'm not saying Ernst & Young doesn't have that. I'm just saying, like, I was in a space where I didn't. So I had to pursue opportunities where I could get that later on. But, and your career changes over the course of time, decades, actually. So, like, in your 20s, it's fine to work crazy because I wasn't single, I was with my wife, but we were both, like, didn't have kids and all that stuff. Now that I have kids, it's like I can't do that, but I'm sure glad I did, because now I'm like a better professional for it, and I feel like it kind of matured me a little quicker.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing your experience, and I'm sure like some ears perked up when they heard that name, Ernst & Young, too. So
yeah,
might get questions
yeah,
about
no, it's it was a great experience. If anybody has an opportunity, like, I wouldn't not do it. But
yeah, it was a moment in life, right?
Yeah, it was like boot camp is what I tell people.
Yeah. All right, so Andrew, we'll start with you again. So how has your career differed or stayed the same from what you imagined it would be when you first started out?
Yeah, so I think it goes back to kind of the start of college. Majored in philosophy, so clearly not really certain what I planned to do with that or kind of where my career path was going to go. I thought I was going to go to law school for a while. I had an internship with a law firm, really enjoyed it, and that's where I really thought I was going to go to. And it's not necessarily out of the picture now, but I realized along the way that I need to develop myself professionally more. That it's not so clear cut and dry that your path that you think about in high school or pre-college is something that you have to follow, and it's a failure if you don't. So realizing, like, all right, maybe I'm not in grad school at 25. Maybe it's going to take a little longer. I'm going to develop myself professionally, do some things first. That's not necessarily a failure. It's more of learning, how am I going to develop through this experience, and how am I going to continue to get better. So I think it's realizing, like Brian was saying, what I prioritize, what I value. So realizing, like, all right, at this point, I want to learn more professionally. I want to kind of gain exposure in a professional environment, and doing that means maybe not going back to school yet. So definitely didn't think that I would be working with like a great company like I am now. I was working actually with a smaller firm before Northwestern. I was working at a home health agency, senior care center in the HR department, just doing general HR stuff, compliance and payroll, and sort of helping them with the recruiting as well. So didn't necessarily assume that that would lead to this. But again, it goes back to, like, where do I want to build something? Not necessarily what do I want to build. So I think that pivot has led to kind of where I am now. It's more like, hey, no, I want to be with an organization that I can build with, that I can grow with. That's been my priority. And that's kind of why I landed where I am now, and why it's something that I'm happy about, something that I think is driving my growth forward. And, eventually, if I still want to accomplish those things that I had thought I was going to do earlier, I still can, maybe in an even easier way, having had this experience.
Yeah, and I know a lot of students think about grad school, getting their MBA, or moving forward, like what's next, and they're like 3 steps ahead. And I like that you shared that there isn't one way to do it. You have to do what's right for you and your story and your timeline, and there's never an end date.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
Go ahead, Brian.
So yeah, my career, if you look at it on paper, it kind of like makes sense. It's kind of like he did accounting, and then he went into private accounting, and now he's leading a practice at an accounting firm. But it's been anything but that. I think looking back, it's easy to connect the dots. But like when I was doing it, I was only thinking a year or two ahead at like early in my career, the first 5 years. And like I had friends who were a lot more strategic and stuff, but I think like I started college as someone who wanted to be like a film director, and now I'm like an accountant. So like complete 180. But I think I just always kind of followed my interest, not necessarily, I never, like, it's not like do what you love, but it's like follow your interest and try to like, combine your interest in your work. It's called work for a reason. It's not called fun all the time, but like, I think I've always had a natural curiosity. So in my career, I've kind of meandered a little bit, and maybe it's sometimes gone slower than some of my colleagues, but like the place I'm at today is pretty. I think it's like pretty cool, and like we're doing some neat stuff. And I could never have like looked at it like especially when I was an undergrad student, and even known how to sequence the steps to get here. So like I would say to any students is like, you don't have to figure it all out like right now. Like most people working professionally, quite frankly, only thinking 5 years at a time. Like that's probably the way I plan now. It's like, I know what I'm going to do for these like 5 years. So like when I got out of school, it was like, I want to like get my CPA and, get some corporate experience for the next 5 years. And it was hard. It was like I came from a blue collar family, and it was like I was the first to hold like a steady job in my family. So like that was an accomplishment. And then, you do that, and you. So I think my career is very different than I ever imagined it, because like when I got out of school, so my career involves a lot of technology. I didn't know anything about technology. I had no master's degree. I had nothing. So over the course of my career, I've learned it all on the job, and it's gotten to point of technical proficiency. And as you talk about master's degrees, like I actually went back for my MBA at one point in time, and I didn't finish it because I started a business on the side. And that's like a choice in life where like, okay, what do I got a trade-off here. I've also got a family. So like, I did the business and I just wound that down. And so like, it just like, it's kind of like a big soup, and it meshes together and it tastes real good, but you don't know what's going into it. So that's like kind of been my career. But it's very different. I don't think anybody could say even like the, quintessential Steve Jobs, like they had no idea how it was going to work out. No idea. So I think being that authentic in your career is important, especially because it takes a lot of stress out of it. Because it's like, I'm going to end up in a good spot. I just maybe can't connect from here A to B, but like you shouldn't be able to.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. That we might try to see into the future, but we ultimately can't. And we can try and plan and think in these increments of time, but it's only in hindsight sometimes when we can really connect the dots and see how we got where we're at.
And I wish I had understood that earlier in my career, because like you look at like people you want to be, and it changes for me, it's changed every 5 years. Like, and when I was at Ernst & Young, I wanted to be a partner. When I was at Nabisco, I wanted to be a director. When now, it just changes. So like, I think being open and authentic with like, especially when you look at people, it's intimidating. Wow, they're this big success and stuff. It's like, well, some of it is like hard work and some of it is opportunity, and you'll probably get a mix of that too, each of us. So
thanks. Good insight. All right, let me take a look here. So can you all think back to when you first learned about your industry? You could also think back to when you first learned about this particular career path that you're involved in. But when did it first occur to you that this was an option, right? And Andrew, if you...
Sure. So I guess getting exposed to the recruiting world, I learned about this in college through kind of getting recruited myself, applying for internships, applying to different positions, talking to recruiters, and then realizing like this aligns pretty well with, the client-facing role that I do enjoy, being able to maybe nurture someone through an opportunity, kind of serving them in that way and helping them facilitate getting better themselves. Like that's something that I enjoyed having that happen to me. I enjoyed, being recruited and kind of being facilitated and taken through a process. And that helped me realize that I think I'd enjoy doing the same for somebody else. So, that's a pretty straightforward way, I think, to get exposed to recruiting by being recruited. And where I really learned about this industry, this particular role, actually as a kid, I was exposed early. I had a neighbor who was navigating an unfortunate event in her life, and she was getting a policy for someone who passed away. So that was like my first exposure into like the industry, and just realizing like how much it affected the rest of her life. Seeing kind of her change and her growth from, I think I was like 11 or 12, and seeing how that life played out, thinking about how like different it would have been if she didn't have that policy in place with her two kids. That really kind of like made me realize like, this is an important thing, and it affects people. Really does. It affects generations of people. And that was kind of my first exposure into the industry. And then combining the two here, recruiting kind of for our internship was a great opportunity for me. I learned about it through actually a professor at my college. So definitely keeping my ear on the ground and just making sure that I was aware of opportunities that made sense for me. And first, by letting them know that I was interested in those opportunities. So I think keeping in mind the soft skills is also something that's really important for students. That's something that maybe I didn't understand at first. I thought it was more about, well, I have to learn how to be a recruiter. What does that mean? Well, I have to do all these really specific things. It often comes down to the soft skills. It often comes down to communication and building trust. So taking that understanding too lends itself, I think, to success.
Thanks. Go ahead, Brian.
Yeah, so in terms of, sorry, I was listening so intently. Can you just repeat the question? How did I learn about
that happens to me too.
So, I was actually like so focused. So my sophomore year, I think that was like film Brian, and I took my first accounting class and I did really well in it. And so my accounting professor between my my sophomore and my junior year kind of was like, "Hey man, you're good at," he didn't say man, but he's like, "You're good at this accounting stuff. Like, have you ever thought about a career?" I was like, "Oh God, no." It was a subject that I liked and I was decent at. And I knew it had a lot of job prospects. And I think for a 20-something-year-old, like when you're graduating college, at least for me, it was like, I came from a background where it was like, job stability wasn't like, that's something I crave because I didn't really have a lot of it as a kid. So being a film major was like totally the opposite. So that's where I first found about this accounting thing. I didn't really know, I knew about debits and credits, but I didn't really know what it was. I didn't know like, what does an accountant do? And quite frankly, I didn't even really know what an accountant did before I got an internship. Like I knew academically, like the subject, but how that translates to the practical real world, I had no idea about. And like, it really wasn't until like I got a full year under my belt of like the real work world did I get it. I found out about it in my sophomore, junior year, and like my current position, I had no idea. I mean, you might think I'm some fool just fobbling around, but like, I think it's important to know that like I think the best advice I got from actually one of my film professors, Meg, I don't know if you remember her. But she said, I was like a very nervous undergrad, like very nervous about like, if I make the wrong choice with my career, the world's over. And I felt like that anxiety all the time. So like, I was like, I had this like film thing and this accounting thing, and I probably put way too much emphasis on it, but I met with my my film professor, and she was like, I was like, what do you think I should do? She was like, go for the maximum amount of change that you can go for between when you walk through those doors to the time you leave these doors, the maximum change. So it's like, all right, film accounting, let's do it. So then I probably took her a little too literally, but I think what it did is it like, you at least can check the box and say, yeah, I explored it and it's not for me. And that's what I did with film. And then, I've always had that openness towards any part of my career. What you do today doesn't have to be your tomorrow. And usually it builds. So like, and you probably will have many jobs over the course of your career. I think the new statistics are like people are having second and third careers more often. So.
Yeah, I appreciate you taking us into the mindset of, what it was like to be Brian as a college student, because what student hasn't at some point kind of questioned where they're at? Is this the right major? Like, what am I going to do for a career? I can't see yet where I'm headed. So.
Yeah, I think we put too much emphasis on what you major in, and the fact that you do go to school and you do learn how to, like, I think the more thing to consider is like, can you think critically? Like a lot of the higher level positions I've ever seen in corporate America are by like philosophy majors and my CFO of finance, he was in charge of all North America, Cadbury and Nabisco, was a philosophy major, and accounting was actually something, and he's from England, and it was seen as vocational, like training. You come and learn on the job. So I think if I had known that earlier in my career, or when I was an undergrad, I would have been a lot more like at ease with like, okay, like I don't know tomorrow, but at least I, get a job, I learn what I do, what I don't like, and then you just kind of keep going and never settle. But you're also not trying to like fit an entire career into like a week. That's the other mistake I made.
Yeah, thank you so much for your insight. You both have wonderful stories to share, and I think very relatable. So we have a couple minutes left. So I think I want to dive into this question of a brief example of a professional mistake or a failure that you faced and what you learned from it. So this could be something way back when you were a student, but it could also be something, that happened yesterday. So whatever you want to share.
Sure. Yeah. And just going back to kind of one of the points that Brian made last time, I think it is critical to understand it does come down to the soft skills, and oftentimes what you lend to something is really more about the communication, the critical thinking. And those pieces are oftentimes more important than knowing how to walk in and do something specific to the job. You'll learn it as long as you know how to speak to people and think critically about a situation and analyze it. I think that lends itself to really anything. As far as professional mistakes, I would say probably the biggest one that still kind of haunts me is I had an internship actually, and in a staffing firm my junior year, and it was going great, and I could have continued doing it, and I chose not to. I had a trip lined up where I was traveling to Europe, a little backpacking trip over the summer. So instead of continuing my internship, I chose to travel. And I always wondered what would have kind of led, what would have come from that internship if I continued it, if I didn't just end it. It took me maybe 7 or 8 months to find my first role after I graduated. Had I not traveled during that summer, that might have been a different story. I might have been able to pivot that into a role right after college and maybe have had a different kind of track starting off. So I still think of that maybe as a mistake in that way. I wonder, could I have done something better there? I think I should have utilized that opportunity more. So, I think it comes down to making sure that I'm not going to do something to hurt my future. At that time, it seemed more important to go to Europe than it did to continue an internship. But in hindsight, the opposite is true. So I think it comes down to realizing how does this affect my future? How does this affect myself? And to really realize if you have an opportunity, leverage it. Make sure that you're really building bridges and that you're building trust and relationships, because that's all going to kind of feed itself into your later career, whether it's just by gaining exposure doing that or by actually something that comes through that. So that was a lesson that I learned kind of through all right, don't leave for Europe, continue your opportunities and take them, make the most of it that you can.
Yeah, I can appreciate that. It's hard sometimes to think longer term, and we can be short-sighted. Europe internship.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It comes down to priorities. Exactly. Just realizing what I want my 2 years to look like, from 2 years out.
Yeah, really great points. Thank you for sharing that and your honesty. And, again, I think these are things that students are going to relate to for sure. So, yeah. Brian, go ahead with our last few minutes here.
Yeah, I would. Europe is always awesome, so I would have been right there with you. I think kind of more currently, that this has been a common mistake throughout my career. It's been less about a specific instance and more of a thought process. It's been probably underestimating my own capabilities and overestimating that of colleagues. So coming out of college, I was oh my God, how am I ever going to survive in this corporate world? And I was constantly oh my God, this person is so good at this person, and this kind of catastrophizing. And then it's kind of been doing that for a long course of my career. And it definitely has pushed me, but I think, I think knowing that you can probably figure something out on your own, and you don't necessarily need to benchmark yourself in your career, because I think culturally, we want to all have the big job and we want to be this person or that person. And I struggle with this daily, but I think if there was one mistake, I've wasted a lot of time worrying about necessarily, who has what job, what level am I? And I don't think everybody thinks like this, but I've probably overdone it. But it's not necessarily what level you are. I think there's also other ways to calibrate success, and I wish I hadn't made that mistake as often, and I still make it daily. Like I walk around like, whoa, they got a big job. Like, and it's like, you kind of have to like catch yourself in it and like reset and like kind of be more holistic in like how you think about yourself and your career. Because I think, that thought process can be detrimental. So I think, because I think over the long enough time horizon, you can do a lot of things you never thought you could do. But I think you also have to be okay with like for everything you do pursue, you give up something else. So the other question is like, are you willing to? And like, there are some things I'm not willing to do. Like I started my own consultancy at business while I was working a full-time day job. And like, yeah, I could have scaled it up, but I was like, you know what? I have kids and like, I care about that more than I do that. So I'm going to go do something else. So I think that level of authenticity and like, I know I'm kind of rambling, but coming back again to like not comparing yourself so much. And it's easy to do, especially with social media and everything these days. College kids now have it a lot worse than we ever did with like, everybody's crafting an image and you're trying to live up to it. And it's like, you don't really need to.